Down to write this sermon, it took me a while to find my inspiration. I wasn't really sure about the connection between vulnerability and change, and I was kind of confused as to why I chose this topic in the first place. But vulnerability is important. It's important for making connections with other people, for asking for help. But how does it relate to making change in the world? But then I remembered that the reason I chose this title for the service is because vulnerability is more than needing help. There's also vulnerability in offering help. If we are to create change, if we're to make this strange, hard, crazy world better for everyone, we have to be willing to see our own vulnerabilities. We have to be willing to face our fears and be open to change. So let's think for a minute about change. There are two ways to see change. The first is from someone who relies on stability, and their reaction is often, I don't want to change, I don't want this situation to change, I'm happy the way I am, and I'm happy with things the way they are. This viewpoint can usually be based on fear. If things change, then it might be worse off than I am right now. And another way that you can look at change, though, is it's often experienced by someone who enjoys the excitement of new things. This reaction to change is often, oh, cool, I wonder how this new change will shape my life differently. People who react this way are often more resilient than people who react with fear. In one of my classes last year, a visiting scholar came to speak to us about putting together ritual while leaving portions open for improvisation. We began the class with an exercise that involved the group reading a piece of scripture aloud without any pre-assigned parts, without any guidance as to when to start or stop, and we were to read it aloud and just let what happened happen. She explained to us that if 4 different people read the same part at the same time, or if there was a long time of silence, that was the way that the scripture wanted to be read. Most of us were really hesitant and confused, and were really uncomfortable. And then we got going. We suddenly had 3 people say the same thing. And then another person wanted to repeat it again just because it seemed so important. And then suddenly the silence just rang out. It felt like a holy process. She taught us about being open to change, being open to the unknown, and she taught us about the beauty of letting go of anxiety. The lesson that she taught us started with this, and it's followed me ever since. She asked us, what do you think the opposite of anxiety is? And I'm sure you all have words going in your mind like calm or acceptance or something equally beautiful like that. But her response was, the opposite of anxiety is curiosity. Anxiety is, oh no, what's going to happen? And curiosity is, oh yeah, I wonder what's going to happen. Anxiety is about thinking of the outcome of events and imagining the worst, and curiosity is about thinking of the outcome of events and imagining the best. Reacting with curiosity is just one outcome of resilience, and resilience only comes when we're willing to be vulnerable to outcomes beyond our control. In order to embrace positive change, we need to be willing to have bad things happen. It sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? It sounds like I'm asking you to open up the front door of your house and invite everyone inside, including all of the bad people who want to hurt you and steal your stuff. It sounds like publishing an ad in the paper, come to my house and steal all my stuff, I'll be home between 6 and 6 if you want to hurt me. It feels like being helpless and scared and open to all the pain that we're trying to avoid in life. But being vulnerable is not being helpless. Vulnerability is not being weak or worthless. We are all vulnerable, whether we hide it behind a mask or show it to the world. We are all vulnerable. It's only the people who are willing to accept their vulnerability who are able to be resilient. So say you had a bad fall on the ice when you were a kid. And now that you're all grown up, a friend takes you to an ice skating rink with the walls. That's the important part. And all you can think about is that you might fall down. You might land on the ice and hurt yourself. So what do? You hold on to the side of the rink and you just inch along, moving slowly. It's not even skating. But you can't enjoy yourself because you're so worried that you might get hurt. So assume you've been working on this vulnerability stuff for a while and realize that the fear is getting in your way of having a good time. You have a couple of options. You could quit skating, just leave your friend at the rink and head home. Or you could ask for help. You could find someone to take your hand, maybe your friend, and go with you around a couple times. Or you could accept the inevitability of falling and throw yourself down on the ice to get it over with. If falling's the worst that could happen, wouldn't intentionally falling help make that fear a little less scary? Wouldn't you now be able to say, well, fell down, I can get back up, and now I can try going around a couple times, and oh, maybe this is kind of fun, and actually maybe I'm kind of good at it. That is resilience. Bouncing back from a fall, getting back on the horse, brushing yourself off and saying, that's the worst that could happen? No problem. We've been taught to fear a lot of things in this life. That there isn't enough to go around, not enough food or housing or enough money, and especially not enough love. And that if we're not perfect, we're not worthy of connection and love. We've been taught to fear people will take advantage of us if they know we have weaknesses. So we shore up our vulnerability by building walls and keeping secrets. We all have our different ways of keeping people out. Maybe you act like you're always happy and loving and generous, but really you're angry all the time. Or maybe you don't reach out to people, pretending that everything's okay with you when really all you're doing is hurting all the time. Sure, I mean, these are great tools to use in some situations, but the problem is we can't hide who we are and connect in a real way with other people. If you only ever show people your mask, you will never trust that they really love you. Back in September, I was reminded of the Jaharing window. I bet many of you have heard of this exercise or experienced it yourself. You're given a list of adjectives and you pick 5 or 6 that you feel describe you. And then other people who know you pick 5 or 6 that they think describe you. The results are divided into 4 quadrants, and the top half are the words that people choose for you, and the bottom half is the words that you've chosen for yourself. And then the left half, your left half, is the words you've used. That's different, I already said that, sorry. The left half are the words that get lined up, where you've already chosen those as well. So it's the words that other people have chosen, the words you've chosen, and then how they overlap in that left half, and then the right quadrant are the ones you didn't choose. So they're all named different things, but the 2 that are most interesting are the top right quadrant, which is known as the blind spot, and the bottom left quadrant, which is known as the hidden area. In the blind spot are the words that others have used to describe you, that you haven't used to describe yourself. And actually, a lot of people find that they're surprised how many good words are in the blind spot. You think, oh, that's the spot I don't want to put the bad words there. Right. No, actually, you don't always see. We're very overly critical of ourselves. You don't see how many good things other people see in you. So the 4th quadrant is the hidden or facade quadrant, which is usually the one that it's brought up when we're talking about vulnerability. This is the quadrant where there are things you say about yourself that others don't see. This is the quadrant with the most room to grow. These things that we hide about ourselves are often our most vulnerable parts, the things we don't want others to see. So we create a facade, we put a mask on to cover our flaws, a wall that we use to keep out the pain. But here's the rub. Shutting out hurt also shuts out happiness, Avoiding pain also means avoiding joy. We can't pick and choose what we feel. The only way to experience real love is to be open to experiencing real hurt. The only way to change is to face our fears. Vulnerability is about coming out from behind your mask and feeling the power of that authenticity. In his book, The Barefoot Doctor's Guide to the Tao, a spiritual handbook for the urban warrior, author Stephen Russell says, vulnerability is the only authentic state. Being vulnerable means being open for wounding, but also for pleasure. Being open to the wounds of life means also being open to the bounty and beauty of it. Don't mask or deny your vulnerability. It is your greatest asset. Be vulnerable. Quake and shake in your boots with it. The new goodness that is coming to you in the form of people, situations, and things can only come to you when you're vulnerable. We've been taught that showing vulnerability is weakness, but really, showing vulnerability is power. Power is more than building walls or wielding weapons. Power can allow someone else to understand who you are. Power is hearing who another person is and connecting to them. Power is seeing the suffering of others and choosing to recognize that it could happen to you at any time and moving forward anyway. Power is saying, I've been hurt and I will be hurt again, and I choose to remain open to what life brings me. It takes a lot of strength to live that way. It takes a lot of courage. There is so much that can happen to us in this strange, hard, crazy world. There's so much suffering, so many disasters waiting for us around the corner. If we let our fear run the show, we're likely to stick our head in the ground anytime we get a whiff of anything that might upset us. This may be why so many people don't do anything about the environment or homelessness or social justice efforts of any kind. It's too big, it's too hard, and it's too scary to look at the suffering and imagine that it could happen to me. I don't want to face the people who remind me of the fact that I could lose everything and be destitute and living on the street. I don't want to face the fact that we as a country, have effectively abandoned our poor. We as a culture have become so fixated on scarcity that even owning a home and having thousands of dollars in savings doesn't feel like enough to keep us safe. How can we give money to anyone else if we don't feel like we have enough? According to Brené Brown in her book, Daring Greatly, worrying about scarcity is our culture's version of post-traumatic stress. It happens when we've been through too much, and rather than coming together to heal, which requires vulnerability, we're angry and scared and at each other's throats. We have abandoned vulnerability and each other in order to protect ourselves. But the truth of the matter is, we can't do this alone. We can't save ourselves. We're all in this together. We have to stick together to make anything better. We have to start with our own vulnerability. We've got to be willing to see how vulnerable we are and have to be able to start to live from that vulnerability. When we put walls up between ourselves and others, especially the people we need to help, we can't connect with them in a real way. We can't empathize with them, and we can't make real change. Antoinette Tuft, the school administrator in Georgia, who talked a gunman out of shooting anyone, is an example of strength. In the reading, it said a month ago, but I'm sure at this point it's more like 6 months ago, but you can still look it up and find out about her. Antoinette, she stood strong, not letting the gunman any further into the school than by her desk, and she showed courage when she shared her vulnerability with the man pointing a gun at her. She showed the gunman that she was hurting too, and she understood that life sucks, but the only way we can get through it, the only way we can do anything is together. As the poet Chris Jami says, to share your weakness is to make yourself vulnerable. To make yourself vulnerable is to show your strength. Antoinette saved lives by showing her vulnerability. And in her vulnerability, she showed her strength. We all have vulnerabilities, and we all have inner strength. We can all make a difference in this world, but if we really want to make change, we got to face our part in the problem. Facing your own faults is a huge, scary act of vulnerability. Looking at the ways you've inadvertently played a part in a society that's broken can shake you down to the foundation. But facing that vulnerability is what makes it possible to see a path forward. Not that long ago, I was shaken by my experience taking a class on exploring white privilege. I sat in a room with many other people and realized that we all, especially myself, had made certain assumptions about the way the world works that don't ring true to most people of color. I feel like the world is generally a safe place. I know that I can find people who look like me most places that I choose to go. I took these things for granted. So in the end of March, there's a white privilege conference in Madison. And anyone who wishes to go deeper on this stuff, I encourage you to go. It's going to be really great. It's 4 or 5 days of intensive work on being aware and working to end white privilege. In light of the recent Race to Equity report completed in Dane County, have you heard about this? There's a report in Dane County of the racial inequity that is thoroughly entrenched in Dane County, Madison area. So in light of that, Madison is really absolutely ready for this. Moving to Madison was an interesting experience for me, having lived in racially diverse neighborhoods in both San Diego and Manhattan. I was used to seeing many people of color in my daily life. I'd heard from lots of people about how wonderful Madison is, and I was delighted to find out that they were right, and that the city I'm currently living in, feels comfortable, feels safe. But what I realized after being there for a while was that the reason I found it comfortable was that I was in a predominantly white neighborhood in our city. Most of the neighborhoods that I'd been to had felt very upper middle class even, and I was completely shocked that that was why I was feeling safe. I felt like I'd bought into this propaganda that white people are safe people and people of color are dangerous. I feel like I'd betrayed my own belief that I was a good person working toward the goal of ending racism. I had to open myself up to discomfort to admit it to myself. And I've had to open myself up to vulnerability to admit this to you. We have to start first from our own vulnerability and tenderness and be willing to stretch our own comfort zone in order to change. So here I am, standing in front of you, sharing my vulnerability, pushing the limits of my discomfort, and I hope you will choose to do the same. I'm still a work in progress. I still have to be open and vulnerable to finding out new things about myself. I'm still every day looking for small ways to be rebellious and create change, even if it's only in myself. Tomorrow I might find my way to creating change in a more rebellious way, in a larger way, but maybe tomorrow we all might use our vulnerability to change the world. Thank you. This is the time that you